There you are. If you want to survive this, stay with me.
Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spinner Rack. We also have
Calvin Ellis, ready to rock.
Today we'd like to thank you guys for checking out our Superman videos. Obviously, even the ones that aren't as successful as the ones that you guys went out there for. And since
They're all
you guys,
successful.
but thank you guys for checking out the lowest videos that we did. And so since we've done that, we've got a backlog of a lot of Superman stuff on our site, so you can always check out that. You will be seeing some of the older videos put forward just to see, you know, some of the backlog, because sometimes people don't like to go in the back, but you'll see as we just did the Superman the movie that Cal did. Now we're just going to talk about Lex Luthor. Since we have Lex Luthor here, we might as well talk about him and some of our favorite moments of him. No actual amount, but just some of the classic sort of storylines. Do you want to talk about Luthor in general?
Yeah, I'll start off. One of the things with Lex Luthor for me reminds me of Iago from William Shakespeare's Othello. He doesn't really have a genuine reason for the enmity that he has against Superman. It's not enough that he tries these plans and Superman thwarts him. That's more like Spider-Man and the Sandman, where, okay, I'm annoyed that this guy keeps me from robbing the bank, but I am trying to rob the bank after all. Luthor switched from, okay, I've got these plans and Superman thwarts me, as to, I'm trying to kill this guy. You know, I'm trying to just take him off the face of the planet if I could. And the funny thing was, the Earth 2 Luthor was worse than the Earth 1 Luthor, because Lex Luthor of Earth 2, he would have destroyed the planet if it meant he could have killed Superman. He was this was the guy who still hadn't kept his hair. He was worse. When you saw some of the stuff that he was coming up with, there's really not that particular reason, and I think they realized that at some point, way back in the Silver Age, when they decided to give him some connection with Superboy and grow out of there. That was, of course, wiped away with the reboot in 1986. But that's one of the things with the character that I've always thought to be very interesting, where a lot of people accept him and a lot of the stuff that he says, but much like in the form of Iago from Othello, he doesn't really have a genuine reason for disliking Superman.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that because you were saying this to me before, and I just thought about it yesterday. Is there, outside of Luthor, is there someone else you feel is kind of his Moriarty or someone else?
No.
Okay.
No.
I just want to make sure of that.
It's Lex without it. The Lex is one of the few, if not the only Superman villain who can keep coming back, because the rest of them are so powerful. You can't really have this guy as a recurring villain like every 3 issues. It's too destructive. You can't have Doomsday as like, oh, well, Doomsday is Superman's sparring partner. It's like, are you kidding me? No. Batman and the Joker, no problem. Spider-Man, the Green Goblin, no problem. Those are very localized battles. But when you have a guy like Superman who's that powerful, he can't have a villain like Mongol showing up every 6 months. It's just not feasible at the end of the day. So Luthor works because he can't go over there and just punch Luthor's ticket every time he sees him, just, knock him into space or something. He's got to find a way to resolve the situation without killing him. And then because of that, Luthor remains a perpetual threat.
Mm-hmm. So for me, just going through some of my favorites, most of the time, since obviously you don't have I'm always keeping in mind where I was at when I was first reading comic books and to the 80s, that sort of thing, not using the ability to go through, go through the internet or something like that, or buy a back issue. I think outside the Superman the movie, or before the Superman the movie, one of the things that for me was the quickest way I got to see Superman was in the Superman cartoon from the 60s, The New Adventures of Superman.
Keepers, Lex Luthor!
Precisely. And Superman, arch foe.
and I was really jazzed up about that. The build of Superman was kind of like, I guess more like who's that guy? Early Kurt Schappenberg, where he was a little more broad, and in that one, Luthor is very much a villain in that. He's very much like where we would look at a evil mastermind. But there was one issue. I wish I could. I'm going to try to find the episode. I was watching this on the videotape that I'd rented. I watched all of them when I was in the late '80s. I guess it was the early '90s, maybe like '91. And I rented it, and I was just like plowing through them and remembering some of the stuff. But the thing I didn't remember was one where Superman and they were very arch enemies, but they had to work together to get off this planet. So I was like, this is kind of fun, because he's been so trademark hating Superman, trying to kill him, setting him up, capturing this and all these other episodes. And this one where they had to work together was pretty fun for me. So it was like, I would go to me, that's one of my first real experiences with Luthor, because he's in like a good 4 or 5 of those episodes. So, and the things stand out where they did one where they kind of had to work together to get off a planet. So I'll go with that's kind of my first thing. Do you want to chime in, and I'll chime in with something else?
One of my, this is an early one, and it's by Jerry Siegel, but it's an imaginary story. Let me see if I remember the issue correctly. I believe it's Superman. I believe it's, you know what? I got to get the issue number correct. I think it's Superman 169.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Superman 169. And it was a double whammy for me, because in this, Luthor finally achieves what it is. No, it's Superman. Is it? No. Superman
149?
Yeah, I think 149 is the correct number.
Yeah.
And Lex Luthor finally achieves what he wants. He kills Superman. He totally, he says that he's reformed. You know, he plays possum wonderfully. Superman's totally taken in by it. And before you know it, he has Superman, tied to an operating table and is just bathing him with kryptonite until finally he dies. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing he can do. Superman is actually, he's dead in the whole story. Supergirl comes at the end to arrest him. And the irony, of course, is that it's written by Jerry Siegel, and there should be nothing lost on the purport of that story, because Siegel himself was embittered, towards DC Comics for, how things had turned out with his relationship to the character he created. So the first story ever of Superman being killed, let alone by Lex Luthor, is written, by Jerry Siegel. But it was just it was the story where he played possum so well. And then you see him taking such delight in killing Superman, where it's like, I'm just going to keep loading the kryptonite until this guy until finally he was dead. And there was nothing to be done about it. There was no way out.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the ones where Mort Weisman didn't find a way for Superman to come back. He said, well, it is. Usually they have a way where, like, at the end, Superman comes in. So it's interesting the way he let it be as is, where it wasn't like...
Well, it's an imaginary story. Maybe he was like, you know what, Jerry? Okay, the character's dead. What now?
Yeah, because usually Mert would figure a way at the end he's Superman again. He's Superman, we would look at Elseworld where it's kind of different kind of setup. It's like, no, this one they let happen as is. So, let's see, hold on. For me, I will just make a casual mention of what's that thing? Casual mention of seeing him in the Joker and I believe it was Joker and him in the Batman 40 to 60 where we had a World Finest issue where they had them together, but that's not one. That's the same where I remember seeing him. But I'll go back into, I guess it's the Bronze Age. It was like, Action Comics 466. I think that's the one where you have Luthor in his classic purple outfit, and he's punching the little kid Superman, and he got Batman and the Flash in the background, and they're kids too, and he's already killed them, and he's gonna kill Superman too also, and that's one we had. I always say me and my brother had as kids, because I don't know which one of us bought it. That one probably might have been COG, but it was like we both read it. So it's this story where it starts off Superman's a kid, and he can't do anything about it. He's like Superboy's age, but or maybe a little bit younger, not Super Baby, but it's like he can't even fight Luthor. Luthor is just like when Superman throws a punch, he catches it and he crushes his hand, and then the people see this Superman getting beat up and they feel sorry for Superman. They're like, oh, he's taking advantage, beating up a little kid, and then Superman like this. That makes it that much worse. And so I don't know how this has happened. And he runs into Batman and Flash, and they're also kids, so they're like, they have to kind of try to figure out how to get out of this. And every time Luthor comes back, he has even worse intentions on Superman. Then he's like fighting, Superman's fighting him, or so more so Superboy at that point, but he doesn't. For some reason, his powers are not working against him. And then he tries to do an uppercut, and Luthor takes his power glove and puts it in Superman's hand, and Superman's punching himself. And it's a classic kid thing of having Superman punch himself. It's like, good Lord, this is just terrible at what he's doing. It's like really like vile and terrible. And then later on, he like kills Batman and he kills the Flash, and then it's like, you're next, Superman. And then Superman figures that wasn't the real one of them, and this is just kind of some sort of trick that he's done. He's not actually been aged, but it's some sort of thing that he can't fix. So obviously Superman breaks out of it. He realizes the other heroes that were killed, they were just robots that he had made. And he goes to he goes to, I guess, the Watchtower, and he explains what happens at the end of that. But it was just like, as a kid, like as a kid, everything is real. So like when Thing says he's leaving, the next issue is like, how are they going to do the next issue? So in reading that, where he's just so terrible, it's just you can't figure how he's going to get out of this story. So it was a fun one, a tough one as a kid to read, but it's also a great cover, and also great by Neil Adams, great inside art by from Kurt Swan.
Okay. I know the cover on that one.
Yeah, that's a classic one. It's definitely a classic.
Classic cover. I don't. As big as a Bronze Age fan, I don't think I ever read that one.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever got around to reading it. And I know I want to because I've always seen the cover like, oh, what's going on here? I'll get around to it. It's not going anywhere. Let's see. I'll chime in. Oh, this is action. I think it's a 3 or 4 parter, but it's an Action Comics 512. Where, and again, this is another story where Lex Luthor has reformed. He reformed. This is not an imaginary story. So he's actually reformed. And Superman's like, look, I don't trust you. So he takes him to the Fortress of Solitude. He checks him out to make certain he hasn't done anything to himself. There's no scientific trap or anything of that nature. His brain hasn't been altered. He really puts him, through the gamut of tests. And then he's like, all right, well, the tree will be judged by its fruit. So let's see what you got, Luthor. And Luthor goes around. He's, he's walking the walk. He's doing all of these good deeds. He's, paying for it. He's paying his penance for everything that he's done. And Superman's like, okay, well, he's showing everything. I can't really say anything. What's more, Luthor turns over a new leaf because he's actually fallen in love with this woman whose life he saved. Okay, so he's fallen in love with her. They're in love with each other. They're going to get married, and they do. And he's still good. Nothing happens. So they get married, and part of the wedding tradition, you say, "Hey, Superman, would you, are you going to kiss the bride?" He's like, "Oh, sure." So Superman leans in to give her a kiss, and they both disappear, like they both just, vanish out of thin air at the end of the day. And it's at that moment that Luthor finally comes back to himself, because he had put in some sort of post-hypnotic suggestion that would only happen once Superman was killed. And, what he did was he successfully erased his memory. He erased his memory of the entire plan, so he would legitimately fall in love with this woman, so it would not be a lie. So nothing he was doing would be a lie, and he wouldn't get his memories back until I think he had his robots come and get him, and then he had stored his memories somewhere, and then he brought all his memories back And so he realized exactly what he did. And, now, of course, Superman was privy to it right before it happened, so Superman didn't die, but his bride did. And in an effort to kill Superman, he actually ended up killing. He was willing to kill this woman that he loved, who I believe in the story, if I remember correctly, he actually created this woman, fell in love with her, just so he could kill her, just so he could kill Superman. So he sits there, and he's totally distraught. He's totally distraught by the end of the story, but that is the length that he went to try to get rid of Superman in this particular. And this was like at least, I believe this was at least 3 parts, maybe a 4-parter. Or maybe a 4-parter that culminates in Action Comics number 12. I mean 512. But when I read the whole thing, and you see it too, because by the end of the story, Luthor is in tears. He's in tears over what happened, because he was in love with this woman, and she's gone. And he's just totally wrecked at the end of the day. But his drive to kill Superman was such that he was willing to put himself through that. He was willing to put himself through that to try to get him. So I believe it starts Action Comics 509 and culminates in Action Comics 512. But it was wonderfully executed. It was wonderfully executed.
Well, then what was it? Before I do my third, I'll just mention, I, as a kid, seeing Superman the movie, and seeing definitely the TV version where you got to see Luthor's lair with all of the Superman busting through all the traps. I was, it wasn't obviously exactly like the Luthor I'd seen in the comic books, but he also had, his sidekicks, definitely Miss Testpocket, all that worked for me. So it was kind of, and it's interesting to see if you look at, what was it? There's a lot of stuff from the script kind of came either from some of the visuals from the cartoon, and then like Luthor's first appearance with Superman. It's so funny where like Superman just really thinks Luthor is totally nuts, and Luthor is very, I think he got like a robe on. He's got this layer, and he's like, he thinks so much of himself, and Superman just thinks he's crazy, and then that was transferred over to the movie. So it was like where Superman's saying you're a diseased mind like him. He had some idea about him, and I guess he did enough to be a disease for what he was trying to do with the nerve gas type of thing, what he was saying. And of course they played that into the Western. So I just want to mention that was a definite fan of that. But going from the classic Luthor, the early Luthor, we go into the post-crisis, and I'll go to this Adventures of Superman, 437. It's one of the Millennium issues where the Millennium heroes, all the heroes are gone, right? The heroes are dealing with Millennium. So there's a story where who's that guy? Gangbuster has to fight this character called, the Combator, this character that's fighting. This was just messing up the city. So it's a story from 2 point of views. Like one of the women that was in one of the people that was in one of the new Guardians. I think the Jamaican woman Celia, she comes out, and Luthor is out there waiting for someone to come in there, and he's going to tell this whole spiel about Superman because he has his version of the story of what happened to. In Metropolis, and he's trying to sell her that Superman is this, this terror of Metropolis that's all for accolades. So they're together at this restaurant, and he's treating her, and he's trying to explain to her that Superman is this glory hound, and he's not even has all this courage. So it's just funny seeing the Jerry Ordway draws it. Byrne wrote it, and it's like this thing where Superman is like, you're tearing up the city to kill this guy. When the guy fights back, Superman's, all right, let's not do that. Let me find something else to throw at you. And then this, that, and the other. This is just being a gross overstatement. But at the same time, we have the actual news article where it's Lois and the original person. I don't remember the character who played, who was Gangbuster. But they were kind of together, and he dons the costume fighting this Combator, while Superman obviously is with the Millennium thing, them trying to save the universe. And he's fighting him to the standstill. He's doing everything he can. The guy is obviously more powerful. He does everything he can, and he stops the combator. And then, but he's worse for wear, and goes into the hospital. So the girl is like, "This is all BS." Like Superman, the Superman I've seen or heard is nothing like you described. And he's like, "Hey, you don't live in Metropolis," type of deal. And at the same time, when Lex Luthor goes back, Superman comes to his office and he's really upset. Obviously, he can't. The whole point of the stalemate is he can't do anything to him because he's a human. But he's like, "Hey, he's really bothered by him doing that to who's a gangbuster, even though he's not for the whole vigilante stuff. He's just like, that was a good person, someone who fought for the city, and you're gonna pay for that." And then what's the name is like, Luthor's like, I still, somehow figured that someone ruined my plot for the combator, and but this gangbuster, I have to look into it. So it's just go into Luthor's mind and see how nutty he could be at times. So yeah.
Oh, that line you said when he meets Luthor in the robe, and what was the line? What kind of creature are you? That was that?
Oh, in the what's in the early there yeah yeah, that was.
What sort of creature are you? He's like, what sort of creature are you? It's like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, that's so great that kind of transferred into the movie. Oh, hold on, let's pause this for a second. So, any other issues that you wanted to cite? As many as you want.
Well, I've got one more, which I think is probably, in the relationship between the two of them, probably one of the most important after the first appearance of Lex Luthor, and that's Adventure Comics 271, where they have this is pretty much the origin of the enmity that starts between Superman and Lex Luthor, but it starts with him as Superboy. Which, well, I'll do a little sidebar here. When they decided, when they decided that they were going to mix Superman having a career as Superboy, this part of the mythos also went away. And then they gave us Lex Luthor, where the enmity starts when he gets to Metropolis, and he's unhappy that Superman showed him up, and he's like, "Well, I'm going to get you," that sort of thing. And I mean, that was enough for them to keep going, at least from there. And I think it worked largely because there was a large amount of new people coming in to read Superman, and DC was like, "Oh, you don't need to go back and read any of that stuff. We're going forward, so on and so forth." I think it worked for that particular readership. For me, however, people, in the same lane with me, that didn't quite take. I really wasn't sold with the whole businessman portion. But the other thing was that when they later decided they wanted to reestablish that there was some sort of connection between Lex Luthor and Superman starting from Smallville, they still didn't want to bring back Superboy. They wanted the relationship to be between Lex Luthor and Clark Kent, which I thought was ridiculous. I was like, wait a second, he's friends with Clark?
Which one, after the Carlini team?
I'm pretty certain Mark Carlin wasn't there, and this is with Mark Waid doing Birthright. Okay. That's where we That's where we start seeing that. That's where we start seeing that again. And again, it's like, okay, you want Lex Luthor and Clark Kent to have been friends, and then that was Smallville for 10 years. That these guys had, a friendship, albeit a strained one at times, in Smallville. I'm like, but this, okay, I can understand the whole thing with him and Superboy, and him never really putting it together because Superboy doesn't have a secret identity. But with Clark, that's just too close. That's too close to this thing. At the end of the day, it doesn't really make It doesn't make a hill of beans a lot of sense. It doesn't. And even when they went a little bit further with it, it was still that Lex Luthor knew Clark Kent, even though he didn't pay too much attention to him. But the real friendship was between Lex Luthor and Superboy. And that dynamic actually blossomed into some really good Superman stories because you could see because Superman had this relationship, this friendship with Lex Luthor as a kid, that he still held out hope against hope that Luthor could be reformed. And when he was at his angriest, with Lex Luthor, it was because he knew how good Lex Luthor could be, because he had seen that before as a kid, and he was just on this rager, to destroy Superman. That's where the anger really, really came from. But in also moments of kindness, it also came back from that friendship that they shared, albeit briefly, when they were kids. Mm-hmm. So, Adventure Comics 271 is that first meeting. Lex Luthor is Superboy's biggest fan, of course, and he's scientific. He's of course he's a scientific genius. Even as a kid, he tries to he befriends Superboy and creates an antidote for kryptonite, so he no longer has to worry about that. And then, of course, we get this turn. We get this turn where a fire starts over at Luthor's lab. Superboy blows out the fire, but when he does that, he destroys this life form that Luthor had created. A lot of people think it's because Luthor loses his hair in that incident, that's why he hated Superboy. That was not the case. That was another byproduct, but it was the destruction of that organism. He says, I'm never going to be able to recreate this. And I forget who the artist on it might have been. I don't know if it was Al Pastino who was the artist on that issue. But you can just see like the imbalance of mind in Luthor with how angry he became. You have to wonder, like, man, did this guy sort of lose it in the experiment? Did something happen? Because he's just like incurably angry at Superboy for this whole thing. And Superboy takes it on the chin. He's like, no, this is my fault. I should have, been more careful. I didn't realize. He apologizes. And from there on in, he's trying to kill Superboy. He's trying to kill him. He almost does it. He, creates a kryptonite trap, the first of many that he's going to use. And this is kryptonite back in the Silver Age, where when people had kryptonite, they had kryptonite as big as one of those old television sets. It'd be like 4x5, like 4x5 kryptonite. And, and Superboy's, only reason why he's able to survive is because he's able to get the last bit of the kryptonite antidote, even though it's going to wear off, but it's enough for him to survive in that moment. But that right there really grounded the relationship, if you will, between the two of them, and gave an actual reason for the enmity, between the two of them as well. So when that got removed, that was a really big part of the mythos that you could play up, because you did have these particular stories where Luthor and Superman might share a brief aside, where they the entity might be put aside for a certain extent, and they might be even able to share a chuckle based on the relationship that they had, or even in a book where Superman's willing to give Luthor the benefit of the doubt because he wants Luthor to reform. He would love to see this guy be the guy that he used to know, even though he deeply distrusts him, because he's learned that he can't be. He's learned time and time again that Luthor can't be trusted. But it all starts there in Adventure Comics 271. That's one of the best. That's one of the best stories. Without a doubt, it's one of the best stories. It's such a shame that they put that story on ice for so long, even though it looks like they finally fully relaxed the moratorium on Superboy, and not even because of the great story from Adventure Comics and Superboy, but because of crypto, of all things.
All right, so we will see you later with some more Luthor, more Superman stuff, and more backlog of Superman stuff for you guys to check out. And thanks for checking all the stuff and comment. Even though there's been some, there's some we've been going at it. It's always fun to hear your comments and being able to reply to them.
Yeah,
Spinnerack.
Just stay nice in those comments.
Spinnerack.
Out.
We're out. We are out.